Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome back to another edition of Noles Anonymous. I'm your host, Drake, and today in the stream yard, I got the one and only Mr. Davey Wise Esquire. David, before we get into the game, generally speaking, how you doing, buddy?
Been better, Drake. Look forward to the fall. Still looking forward to the fall a little bit, but feel like we fell before the fall.
Well, to be fair, man, we live in Florida, so we really don't get much of a fall until like November. And hopefully, the FSU football team can, sort of click into higher gear before the month of November. Folks, we're here to talk about the game that happened this past Saturday. Georgia Tech beats the Florida State Seminoles 24-21. We've had a few days to process. I think we've gotten our vent and our frustrations majorly out. We're gonna come here with some reasonable takes, some reasonable, I guess, observations that we have. Well, Dave might. I'm speaking for myself. I'm not speaking for both of us here, but overall, I think now we can actually look at the game as a whole. And Dave, where do you want to go first with this?
Uh, I mean, let's just address the elephant in the room.
Mhm.
Um, that looked bad. That looked. It's hard to find a ton to be really excited about from that game because there were so many phases of this team, many of which were supposed to be strengths, which just didn't exist. I mean, like we thought we would have some issues, with the new linebacking core with Kalen DeLoach gone and Tatum Bethune gone. We thought we'd have some growing pains in the secondary with Hakeem Dent gone. Linebacking core was what it was, but my God, man, that defensive line, yikes, that was offensive.
So the opposite of what they should be doing, not offensively, but they were just offensive and just the map in the word. But I think if you
Yeah,
look at the team overall, I mean, yeah, I think you can say it was a very, very disappointing performance, kind of across the board when it comes to defensive line play. You also go look at the play calling, which if you do like a little bit of a deeper dive, I feel a little bit better about it, but still there are some questions when it comes to running on certain downs, holding off, and kind of like being, the stubborn. We discussed this before with Mike Norvell, his stubbornness to kind of go away from what's not working. Like, it's like that goofy meme. I'll bet you I'll do it again when it just
right.
runs with 3rd and 9 for the fourth or fifth time we have the box stacked up against you. But to me, it's a lot more that was a Georgia Tech team that last year obviously was a bottom 25 defensive rushing team, correct? And then you have Brenke in what year number 3. They were going to be improved. And to me, this game kind of looks, when you look at this game in its totality, I think of the 3 Ps when it comes to FSU's performance. It comes to physicality, preparation, and passivity. And those three right there is kind of what to me encapsulates what happened. The team was not physical enough, whether it be the defensive line, the offensive line, or even running backs kind of breaking through the tackles. Passivity, you see players and the linebacking core and also in the secondary, primarily the safeties, who seem like they were hesitant to what they're trying to do. And then lastly, preparation. Georgia Tech was extremely ready for this game because they also kudos to them. They play the game of their lives.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this obviously offline, but the offense wasn't the big issue to me. I mean, you should be able to score more than 21 points against Georgia Tech, but you see a lot of people blaming DJU. DJU did what he was asked. He was asked to hand the ball off a whole bunch. He was asked to throw the ball right at the line of scrimmage. And on the few opportunities where he was asked to throw deep, they were often in a really bad spot already because of being set up by 2 run plays that didn't gain any yards. So you're in 3rd and long situations. So, I mean, we could talk more specifically about it. I don't have a huge concern about the offense. I think, again, and I said this in our preview, I think as DJU and those receivers get on the same page, the passing game's going to open up the run a bit. So there's not stuffing of the box like you saw by Georgia Tech.
Mhm.
Um, and if somebody's going to dare you to throw it, you better throw it. Even if you don't complete it, you better let them know you're willing to do it, or they're going to keep 8 guys in the box and you're going to see exactly what you saw because that offensive line did not block well in that game. One of the most experienced offensive lines in the country just was not up to the task. I do think that'll get worked out, so I'm not super worried about the offensive line. The defense is really what I'm worried about. because I expected them to be way ahead of the offense. You still lost some key pieces, obviously, Bethune and Deloach and Verse and Fisk, but you brought in guys and you returned guys who were supposed to be world beaters and who probably still will be, and have been throughout their careers. But just just shocked by what I saw on defense. Like it looked like like these miscommunications and nobody knew where they were supposed to be, and you have guys moving all over the place pre-snap as if they're running like some kind of American Arena Football League game. That's the way the defense was acting, and if your communication is that off, and by the way, in a year where there was helmet communication through DJ Lundy on that field, just seeing that level of disarray was so disheartening.
So, well, let's go, like, let's leave the defense to the back half of the show, because I think the offense we kinda can pick up a little more on. With the offensive line, if you kinda, like, I don't know if I think you've rewatched the game yesterday. I rewatched the game, before we started recording. The offensive line, like, they did do most of their tasks, and when it come but the one of the big things that we saw was it's kinda how you're saying, like, it should be cleaned up, because there's little things that are happening when it comes to, especially on counter runs, that where the players aren't being in the position right away, or they're just missing blocks. I think there was one play we saw Cam Davis, who he's a freshman, who it's gonna happen. He's an 18-year-old. I think he's only, what, 3 or 4 months removed from what should have been his prom. So to me, a missed block by him, that kinda makes sense. But when it comes to, like, tight ends that have been in the system for quite a few years now, it kinda leaves you to wonder, like, if the actual lessons that are being taught, like, if they're sticking with them, or also if you don't have the personnel for what you kinda wanna run, especially when it comes to the counter run scheme. And then with DJU, I to me, the way you kinda look at it is like how we discussed him heading into the year. We kinda know what he is. He is a decent to solid quarterback. You saw him at Clemson, you saw him at Oregon State. You do look at those passes where it comes to the Ja'Kai Douglas, deep crosser comes to mind, and then the Malik Benson, deep route where he is just slightly off, or doesn't really give them a full, chance to for them to make a play. So those are some things that I think we need to see DJ kind of connect with a little bit more. But then it kind of goes back to you, where he was kind of cold when it comes to not throwing the ball that often. So it's like when you're asking a pitcher to come in, with
Right.
no warm up from the bullpen, just come in, just throw just straight up gas. You need to, like, give him a few more reps before you start doing stuff like that.
Yeah, I was going to compare it to a pinch hitter actually. So, like, you ask somebody to come in a big spot in the bottom of the ninth with the bases loaded, they haven't stepped on the field yet. You're going to have some jitters, and you're not going to be as in sync. So, it just, those were the two throws you mentioned are the ones that are being attacked. The miss down the right sideline to Benson and the crosser to Ja'Kai down the left. Look, those were two throws. I mean, he wasn't really asked to do much more than that. And when you're in all these third and long situations, it's just a tough ask for a guy who you haven't had even try to throw the ball deep. And then you add in the wrinkle that, if you don't trust the protection, which the protection was a big issue, you're not going to wait for those deep throws to develop, for those receivers, get to the end of their routes. Like, you're just not going to do that. You have that internal, timer if you're a good quarterback. And DJU's been in college football long enough that he knows when that clock's about to go off. And, you hold on to the ball, maybe he gets sacked and loses a fumble, and that's what everyone's complaining about. But I'm not going to judge him on those two throws. I've seen enough on film to know what DJU is, and so have you, and so has everyone else. He's a guy that has had some accuracy issues throughout his career, but
Mhm.
he's got one of the biggest arms in college football, and you didn't even bother giving Georgia Tech the impression that that might be a weapon or factor in the game that you're willing to utilize. Never happened. There was no concern on that Georgia Tech sideline that we were going deep. So, yeah, I'm not super worried about DJU. I think there's some unfair criticism of him going around. Not that he couldn't have hit those throws. He absolutely
Mhm.
could have and should have hit that one to Ja'Kai especially. But I think what was asked of him was really tough. I think with the offensive line, I mean, Atkins was out for the game. Maybe that was the reason. Who knows? But
I'm not gonna go that far. I mean,
I don't
but
think so either.
I'm not touching that.
With all the
I
experience,
think it's a cop out,
it's a tough sell for me. But you know
especially when
what?
the assistant's been there for a while too.
If in the next 12, 13 games you see the offensive line just dominating, maybe Atkins' presence really is that important. I guess we'll find that out pretty quickly.
He's
But
the man, but yeah.
there's a lot of work to be done. I just, on the offense, I really that first set, you had all season to script, right? That first series. And you saw all these sets with Roydell and Jalen Lucas in the backfield, and who knows who's getting the ball, but it's lightning and thunder there. And that was really effective. I mean,
And
you were
fun.
doing anything you wanted on that first drive, which it's the first drive, of course, but it didn't feel like we tried anything like that the entire rest of the game. So the play calling was just so head scratching to me.
It was very conservative, and I think it was very vanilla, and I think this is kinda goes to my point where I think Mike thought less of Georgia Tech than probably he should have, even though, quite frankly, if you ask anybody like us, a bunch of the media, I mean, College Game Day, except for Sheamus, shout out WWE, they all thought really low of Georgia Tech. So it's
Yeah.
kinda like maybe it's like, "Oh, this team actually might be decent." But I mean, yeah, I mean, the play calling was extremely conservative. I think they just thought they could lean on Jalen Lucas and Roydell Williams, which for a lot of games you might be able to, but I just think with this game overall, like, you just need to be better prepared and maybe just not. It's not even play with your food at this point because it wasn't even
Yeah.
that. It's more like you just didn't. It wasn't serious. And then also to me, week zero games are odd. They always are. First game after a long hanging over after what the entire team went through last December, first game back in the national spotlight. Like it's a lot. And to me, we'll talk about it later, like probably on Friday, BC game, how they're gonna respond because as Mike Norvell says, the offense is gonna need to respond, and not only them, but also Coach Norvell, with the play calling.
Yeah, I am not going to make excuses like that. It was week 0 for both teams. It was
Yep.
travel for both teams, not playing that game. And I just want to
New
be clear about
DC Georgia
something.
Tech too.
I just want to be very clear about this because there is clearly a Twitter beef going on here. Neither of us, I will speak for both of us here, is advocating to fire Mike Norvell. Just to be very clear.
Yeah, we're not. No, let's. No, that's dumb. That's
But
dumb.
that doesn't mean he's impervious to criticism. The number of times you saw, with a stacked box running straight into it on first down and getting -2 yards, and then running into another stacked box on second down and getting 3 yards, and then it's 3rd and 9, just happened too many times. And the conservative nature of the play calling was just really confusing because that's not what your lost roster lends to. Like Mike Norvell talked about it in the preseason. He talked about how this is an explosive offense that's meant to generate a lot of big plays. You have a big arm quarterback, you have extremely fast receivers, and you have a running game with several really fast running backs plus Roydell back there that you expect to be able to lean on. And just I don't know, man, just really disheartening to hear that in the preseason, what you look forward to and what you think the coaches are going to do. And it's not like you're playing a game of gotcha. Like, oh, you thought we were going to go explosive and we went conservative. We sure showed you. Like, no, playing conservative ball is easily the most simple to diagnose and plan for and adjust for on defense. And there really wasn't a whole lot of adjustment needed for Georgia Tech. And you trusted this staff. I did, at least at halftime. Wasn't worried. Staff always makes adjustments. They've proven it. And not that they don't suddenly now because that game happened, but it was really frustrating to see the conservative play calling carry over into the second half, and most of the issues from the first half carry over.
I mean, listen, goes back to you had a bad game. Just everyone involved had a bad game. Even though offensively, I think you could point out to, Richie Leonard, the Florida transfer. He actually was one of the few bright spots on the offensive line. Malik Benson, and Jalen Brown, both were open at certain times, which to me, if you look at some of the plays, like DJ didn't see him. So I don't know whether or not he was told not to go past his first read. But then again, I'm not the offensive coordinator nor the QB coach. So to me, it all goes to tightening it up heading into BC. Now, before we go over to the defense, I do want to highlight the one player that kind of was the all-star from both teams, and that was Ryan Fitzgerald. I mean, listen,
Yeah.
the kids come from, taking a lot of flack on Twitter from being, a freshman struggling for a few years. Over the past 2 seasons, he's grown into probably one of the most dependable lockdown kickers in the entire country. It hits a 52-yarder and then a 59-yard before half. If you don't hit those two, this game looks a lot worse. He
Yeah.
bailed you out for making this look a lot worse. So it's
And
shout out to Ryan Fitzgerald.
he struck both of those with confidence. That 59 was probably good from 65.
Dude,
He is
he boomed that man.
That kid has
Jesus.
put in the work behind the scenes to make this happen because I mean, people were ready to run him out of town, and that kid has become, like you said, one of the most reliable players and aspects of this team. If you recall, not long ago, Mike Norvell wasn't wanting to kick like 20 something yard field goals because you just couldn't rely on it. And
No.
now Your field goal range is down to like the 40-yard line. That's awesome.
I can't wait till he just booms down a 63-yard field goal to win a game later in the year, but hopefully does not come to that.
Nope.
But let's go over to the other side of the ball now, Dave.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the defense.
Mm.
And I do want to shout out Shaheem Brown. He played a very, very good game. You have some young bucks like a Blake Nicholson who did look good in his first, big game action. Besides, I think this first start at the bowl game last year. But you look at the entire team, and it felt like that. This is why I use the word passivity. They felt like they were hesitant and very passive when it wanted to come to engaging with Georgia Tech. I mean, there was one player in Georgia, the tight end number 85 with Georgia Tech, who was just blocking and abusing anyone that tried, fill in an A gap. So to me, that kind of is what was the crux of the issues that we had was that it looks like they played not scared, but sorta cautious, and I don't know whether that was, going into the game plan because Georgia Tech was the number 1 ranked team in the ACC heading into this game from last season, or also because the conditions were I remind you, it was rainy, it was windy, so but to me, it felt like the team defense on the defense side of the ball played with a sort of caution that definitely bit them in the ass.
Yeah, it's funny watching that game. If you didn't know better, I would think the score for Georgia Tech would be higher than 24. The fact that they limited them to 24 feels like a miracle. There's your positive takeaway. Um, but yeah, you don't want to look up these PFF grades. They are really, really, really atrocious. There's no way there's been a worse game played for FSU on defense in the last 3 years, 4 years. There's no way. Um, you have one guy graded over 70 on defense, and that's Sione Lilihea. And he looked solid out there on the defensive line. Other than that, like I said, my biggest problem with the defense was just the coordination or lack thereof. You have gotten off Adam Fuller's back recently. You've joined that fan club, and there's so much talent on that defense, so much returning talent too. And the talent that wasn't returning that was coming in is either, known quantities or extraordinarily talented. And it just didn't feel like anyone was put in the right position to make plays. Like, again, you just watch all the pre-snap disorganization and people, hitting each other to move around and talking to, like, looking at each other, like, where are we supposed to be? It did not feel like those kids were put in the right spot to, you know, to have any chance of making their assignments. Against the run. I think the one that stands out is the one where the running back, runs right up and then does a spin move and runs off. That's kind of the one that's sticking in everyone's head. Uh, that felt like bad luck, but the rest of it didn't to me.
Yeah,
So
that one was just like that kid just that was a great move.
made a play.
It was like you can't hate on that.
No, that was like, you press the B button on NCAA. What are you going to
Before
do?
the patch, before the patch. Now
Right.
it doesn't work as well. I can tell you
But
that right now.
regardless, I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and pick on any of the players. I'm not going to do that. I'm not happy with all the performances, and the PFF grades tell that story. But Adam Fuller's got to take a look in the mirror because that's not the best offense we're going to play this year, and this is what he's got to work with. And what he's got to work with is pretty darn good. So I'm just really hopeful that it's not even that I'm expecting like all this crazy progression from these players. Largely, these are players who've already progressed and we know are supposed to be good. And they have all this tape of them making these same plays, which is why it goes back to the coaching for me. On both sides of the ball, it was very confusing, just the positions these players were put in. And, the secondary didn't exactly give up a bunch of bombs. I don't have a ton of worry about them. The linebackers, didn't do a crazy great job of plugging the gaps and, protecting the middle of the field. But I also have no idea why you're sending DJ Lundy on 12, coverage assignments. That seems crazy to me. You know what his skill set is. You saw it when he got into the backfield for that one memorably big tackle for loss on that drive. I think we got a 3 and out.
Mhm.
You know what you're going to get out of these guys. And I don't understand why you're not emphasizing their strengths and minimizing their weaknesses. And that's just spoken to for me by how many coverage snaps you put a guy like DJ Lundy in, and see here. You got Cam Riley with 8 coverage snaps and 3 for Blake Nicholson, who actually did a good job out there. But that's a lot of coverage snaps for your linebackers. So I don't know. I hope to see a lot of this get cleaned up. I don't think it's going to stay this bad. I think these players are too good for it to keep looking like this. But this one isn't on them for me.
See, to me, I mean, as you know, I was a vaunted Adam Fuller hater since day one to see Seth on campus, and I've since been converted, as I said before. I don't think it was mainly hit. I think he actually called a pretty fine game. I think the personnel, I do kind of agree with you. I think we should have seen probably more snaps from Blake Nicholson, but that's also his first time starting. I think I want to see more of him. Same with Cam Riley. I agree with you with
Yep.
DJ Lundy. Like, I mean, DJ Lundy's a very he can only do so much. Like, he is a, for run gaps, let him do that. But coverage, that's not his strong suit. That's perfectly fine.
Yep.
But when it comes to looking to me, I go back to passivity. When it comes to the safeties, the miscommunication talking about, I think that goes back to a lot of them have not played with each other for a very long time. And that's, with an Earl Little Jr. or a Devontae Brown that have only been here for about 8 months. So that's the communication you're kind of seeing back and forth. When it comes to the defensive line, you need to see more out of players. I think, Joshua Farmer and Daryl Jackson after that first series where I know everyone's talking about Daryl Jackson being pancaked into the end zone. Not a great look, obviously, but that's your first scripted drive. It's going to happen that way. They actually took on a lot of double teams during the game, so it's going to happen. What I need to see more is from Patrick Payton and Marvin Jones Jr. on the other sides. To me, I need them to show a little more, kind of get after it, be more physical when it comes to everything else. And then also, I need these players like Omar Graham to commit to what they want to do when it comes to actually rushing the passer or simply not taking too long to diagnose the play. I think a lot of it comes to you're thinking too much, and not we need. I think over the next probably few weeks, we're not going to see it next week, probably next week, the week after. I think by October, you're going to start seeing instincts take over, and I think that's kind of what we were lacking in this game.
Yeah, 35 snaps for Omar Graham didn't register a statistic. That is tough. Hopefully coaches either put him in a better spot or find someone who can do that assignment. But I, Drake, I'll just say this. I don't think it's the reason part of the big reason I don't think it's on the players, and I texted you this earlier. Do you realize how unlikely it is that all 4 of those defensive linemen, who College Game Day even said is the best defensive line in the country, not the conference, the country.
They said top 5. They didn't say the best.
One of them did. But regardless, whether it's best or top 5, either way, those are elite defensive lines. For all 4 of those guys to have the worst games of their careers, all in the same game, seems far too improbable to me for it to just be that they all sucked that day. That does not explain it to me.
Sometimes you just have a bad day at work,
All
Dave.
4 at the same time? What are the odds of that? Just like
Probably extremely high, but also, like, it happens, man.
it
Like,
doesn't
it's the
happen.
first game after what, 11, 12 months?
Just for us, not for Georgia Tech?
No, for them too, but also, like, let's be real. I mean, we also talked about how, in our personal opinion, it seemed that Georgia Tech was a lot more prepared for this game than we were. And that also goes to the next thing I want to talk about, and that's coaching.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fine. That does not explain it for me. The odds of all 4 laying a goose egg in the same game, that to me is a greater, more centralized issue than just 4 independently having a bad day players. That's too unlikely for me. So I don't expect that is my point.
No. That's what I mean, though. I think this is the outlier when it comes to that. I think that's what I'm kind of trying to say. Like, hey, it happens. You all had a bad day at the same time, and I can bet you money now it's not going to happen again. If it does, then it goes back to what you're saying, that there is a larger issue here that right now I am not trying to entertain.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, Drake, what do you got for coaching?
I mean, coaching, I think this just kind of goes back to overall. I mean, we've already kind of touched upon it on both kind of sides of the ball. It just really felt like when something was not working, and this is kind of where, ego comes into play, and every single coach has ego. They kind of get to where they're at, with that same ego. That's kind of what they pride and thrive off of, right? I mean, they wouldn't be here in a situation if they didn't have some sort of ego. But to me, this came, with the point where Mike, regardless of what was happening, what the defense was giving him, did not want to stray away from what he knows, or more what he wants to do, right? And that to me kind of is what shot yourself in the foot overall a little bit. And that to me, like that's why I don't have a huge issue with the offense because I think maybe Mike's gonna like take a step back, look in the mirror, look at the game tapes, like here, here, and here, kind of fix this up a little bit. Same thing, going over with DJ, going over the offensive line. This is how we're gonna change things up a little bit. And also, you look at Georgia Tech. Defensively, they made some amazing shoestring tackles, which they were just they played a great game. But to me, coaching wise, I think this is a game where you're gonna have to look at Mike's gonna have to look at himself and say, maybe, just maybe, just try something different. Maybe I can't, maybe I'm not always right. Maybe try something else that works for a little bit and then go back to my bread and butter, what I want to do.
It's funny you say that. You know what it felt like? You know what it felt like coach this game?
Me on NCAA 25.
I say Jimbo. For a little bit there. Like the towards the end of Jimbo's tenure, it felt like you knew what he was going to call for plays. It was very predictable. It was very conservative. And that's exactly what it felt like. It did not feel and it did not have the fingerprints and the identity of a Mike Norvell coached game and team. Just didn't. Um, I have never seen Mike Norvell fail to make adjustments like that. Like adjustments that if they were obvious to us and the casual observers of college football, you
Mhm.
can bet it was even more obvious and a lot earlier for the Georgia Tech sidelines. So I just hope that, again, I hope the offensive line can be attributed to Atkins not being there. I hope that, the defensive performance was, miscommunication or mispreparation by the coaching staff and, that it looks completely different next week. I wish we were not playing Boston College and Thomas Castellanos specifically next
And
week.
Trayshawn Ward. Don't forget about him.
Yeah, I I'm still scarred from Castellanos last year. So I that's not the team I think you want to be trying to make your bounce back effort, like, or at least that's not the quarterback you want to be trying to make your bounce back effort against. Because again, just so many missed assignments and miscommunications and discombobulation on defense. So look, sometimes we've always been used to them making adjustments at halftime and in game. Didn't happen this time. Hopefully they learn from that and make these adjustments pre-game or post-game, I guess in this instance, because there's a lot to clean up if this team's going to stay on track. It still can reach its goal. This team can still make a playoff, can still win the ACC, just got more difficult, but this was a team that was entitled or was going to be able to survive a loss, a freebie. We just it just got a lot tougher though, a lot less room for error.
So to me, I think you throw the playoff aspirations out the window. I think you just,
12
I mean,
teams.
I know it's 12 teams, Dave, but after watching the game, I was like, let's just focus on, a game at a time. You try to go for the ACC championship because right now I think there's a lot of stuff you need to tighten up. And to me, I think it's going to be a lot more growing pains before it gets better. Mainly because there's a lot of stuff when it comes to communication, whether it be along the offensive line, whether it be secondary, but that's going to come from playing together. Because like I said before, a lot of these players have not played, as a unit or like look good as a unit, and a lot of them didn't look good as a unit this past Saturday. But Dave, I think we look great as a unit with this show each and every time we come on here. Let the folks know how they can support us and let them know what to do.
Yes, if you enjoyed today's show, as you always should, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, hit the little bell in the top right or wherever the hell it is. Tells you when these videos drop. And as always, please do comment on the video. Give us your thoughts. Tell us what we got wrong, why we're dumb, or what we got right. Doesn't happen very often, but I love hearing it.
Yeah, Dave's never right, folks. That was Dave. This was Drake. And we'll see y'all next time on Noles Anonymous. Take care, everybody.
Oh no.